You have DEXA scan results, but then you have like bone quality, which is a much better measurement of whether or not your bone can withstand fractures. The OsteoStrong group saw a 2.9% increase in their bone quality, and the exercise group had been doing 2 hours a week for 9 months, saw no change in their increase in bone quality.
Kyle Zagrodzky, he is the founder and CEO of OsteoStrong, which is a collaboration with the famous Tony Robbins, so that's super cool. Kyle has co-authored books. In fact, OsteoStrong is mentioned in Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis' book, Life Force. Kyle is a sought-after public speaker and frequently presents at the Tony Robbins events. Kyle has appeared in 100 plus podcasts, and I'm proud to make this 101 plus podcasts.
When you go to the doctor, like, exercise, probably should lift weights and eat right, and it'll help your bone. That's not true. And so as it turns out, it's not true. And here's why I know.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. Different people impact the health and wellness industry in different ways. On this podcast, we tend to have health and longevity experts that are medical doctors or researchers with doctorates or people whose pain to passion story has driven them towards an expertise they are compelled to share. Our next guest, Kyle Zagrodzky, if I think I said that right, Zagrodzky, comes to us from a very different path. The path is similar to that of a great patron of the arts, or in this case, we can say the benefactor of great wellness technology. I think the most important thing a benefactor needs is great vision, and in this case, experience that can drive that vision forward. In this case, the vision is helping people improve bone density, improve posture, improve balance, improve athletic performance, and experience less joint and back pain. Just a little bit about Kyle. He is the founder and CEO of OsteoStrong, which is a collaboration with the famous Tony Robbins, so that's super cool. Kyle has co-authored books. In fact, OsteoStrong is mentioned in Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis' book, Life Force, which is an amazing book. Kyle is a sought-after public speaker and frequently presents at the Tony Robbins events. Kyle has appeared in 100 plus podcasts, and I'm proud to make this 101 plus podcasts. Kyle, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you.
All right. So, I see you as the patron of OsteoStrong, the benefactor of a technology proven to increase bone density. Before we dive into the technology, can you give us some of your background that put you in the very unique position to shepherd this technology forward? And since we are both from the University of Houston, go Cougs, fold in the University of Houston somehow.
So I graduated from high school in 1987. I've always been, and then right after high school, I went to the University of Houston, but I've always been what you would call a bootstrap entrepreneur. Is in my DNA, and that basically means you get an idea, you self-fund it, and you launch it, and you just basically make it happen. I paid for my first year of school. I became an auctioneer when I was 18, started a company called Kyle Auctioneers, and I held an auction. I collected used band instruments from high school kids that were graduating, and I sold them to high school kids that were coming in as freshmen. And I paid for my first year of school by doing that. So I've always started my own businesses. And when I left college, I didn't go get a job. I went out and started creating. And I've always been drawn to concepts. I've done all kinds of things. I really enjoy concepts that require a problem that needs to be solved, and better if it can help the human experience in some way. So my companies, both the two largest companies I started have been global companies in many countries, employing tens of thousands of people, generating more than $200 million in revenue in the course of my life. And my passion, the company that I've started that I love the most, is OsteoStrong, because it is serving and solving a problem that no one else has ever done. And so it's been a challenging journey, but the outcomes and what we see happening from the people that come to OsteoStrong and the results they're getting are like nothing I've ever seen in the world. And it just puts fuel in my tank every time I get up in the morning.
That's awesome. And you mentioned this morning was a morning where you've just been on fire all morning and haven't even gotten to work out, which
No,
I understand
no.
is really
It's
important.
I came in. So yesterday I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I drove back from St. Louis to Nashville, where I live, and then I had to be in front of my computer for another meeting like this one, and worked all day. And then just to like 9 o'clock, I told my wife I'm done, and went and
Yeah.
fell asleep. Got up this morning, and then we've got a massively busy day today. So and then I get on a flight tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. to go to Toronto for another event. So it's been a busy week.
Make sure to take your My Vital C.
I do. I took it
So
this morning.
yeah, awesome. So clearly an entrepreneur from the beginning, right? And by the way, we graduated high school at the same time. We were at the University of Houston at the same time. I graduated in '93. I think it probably took me a little longer than you. But yeah, I started the carbon manufacturing business while I was still at the University of Houston. So kind of a parallel track here. If you trace back to growing up, was there anything your parents instilled in you that point towards you becoming entrepreneur? Were they entrepreneurs? What did that look like? Where do you think this driving force came from?
I could tell you exactly where it came from. My father was an entrepreneur, but I don't think he had particularly much influence on that. He's influenced me in a lot of ways, but not that area. I'm dyslexic. I have ADHD. And so I wasn't a great academic because it's just really hard for me to read through copious amounts of material. I've got three older brothers and my father who are extreme academics. My dad went to MIT. He went to Stanford. One of my oldest brother went to Wharton School of Business and was president of his class there. My next oldest brother went to Harvard Medical School and graduated valedictorian. My other brother went to became a lawyer. He went to Texas A&M, and he's a brilliant trial lawyer. And then there was me. And so my motivation was really, and it took me a while to figure this out because I had this intense drive, but it was fueled by a fear of failure. I didn't want to be like the family idiot. And truth be known, is like I was just as smart as these guys, but I couldn't express it academically. And so that was just like, dang, why can't I do this? And so, well, I'm sure as heck not going to lose. That was what it was initially. And it took me a long time to figure out kind of who I am. And I was just sitting there like 40, like, who am I? Like, what really drives me? And I really love solving problems and I love helping people. And so whenever I'm doing, I could get bored easily if I'm not doing those things. But when I get that fuel in my tank, it really does. It creates an unstoppable force that I will achieve my goal. When I
I want
started this company, I knew it was going to be a global brand and a household name. The moment I
to.
saw it done.
That's fantastic. So I want to ask one more thing because I have been using this phrase and just want to get your feedback. What do you think about that? Success is often extremely boring. And the context is Michael Phelps swam that same length of pool, probably the same pool at the same temperature after eating the same amount of chicken so many times to get that level of success. Does that statement resonate with you, or would you
Kind of,
maybe
yeah.
interpret it differently?
I think there's some value in that statement. I think it's just that you have a goal. Usually, your goal could be simply stated, like I just said. Hey, OsteoStrong is going to achieve this result for people. It will be a global household name. There are literally thousands upon thousands of objectives that you have to meet, grace you have to experience, work. There's a grind. There's all the things that no one ever sees. It's the tip of the iceberg. It's the I couldn't have done what I've done had I not could not have gotten this company where it needed to go, even without all the previous entrepreneurial experience, the software company, the health clubs we ran, everything that I've done up to that point made me into the person I needed to be to get this company to where it is. And so, yeah, this has been my entire adult life of experience to make it here, plus all the work and challenges of creating an industry, because no one was thinking that there's not a bone building industry out there. Like gyms exist, right? Insurance exists. every other industry, the hospitality industry exists. If you want to go start a business in any of those industries, there are defined templates for success. There's defined messaging for marketing. There's everything already exists. All you have to do is create a brand, a system, and then go smash your face against the wall to make it happen. With OsteoStrong, been the hardest thing I've ever done. Because it was when you're creating an industry and the consumer doesn't even know that this is a thing they can look for, identifying the avatar, creating the messaging, creating the education and all that was extraordinarily challenging. There was just times where I was just like, okay, McDonald's would pay me more than this. Right? But I knew it was done. Like it was so done in my head. And my wife and I fasted and prayed before starting this. And I made a covenant with God, and I said, okay, I will only stop this when you stop me or tell me to stop. So it was just kind of like, then if he's never told me to stop, he's never stopped me. So then it must be done. It's what he wants me to do.
And how many locations do you have now?
200.
200.
We'll break that this year. We've got several on the hopper right now, and many that we're opening.
That's awesome. So let's dive into it. You didn't invent the technology behind OsteoStrong. In fact, I believe that's the pain to passion story of John Jaquish.
Yep.
Can you tell John's story and then the story of how you came across the technology behind OsteoStrong and really what impressed you about the technology from the very beginning?
Yeah, his story's kind of a cool one because he was in school, and I don't know if he'd started working his PhD yet or not, but his mom had came home when she was in her mid-70s, and she'd come home with an osteoporosis diagnosis, and she was scared. And so he's like, okay, then, he didn't know much about osteoporosis. He had a degree in biomedical engineering, and he did some research, and he's like, okay, that's a thing. But the more research he did on osteoporosis, he's like, it's classified as a disease, but it's not a disease. It's just a deconditioning of bone. And anything that could be deconditioned can be reconditioned. So he started studying, why do some people have stronger bones than others? He discovered that gymnasts have stronger bones than any other class of athlete. And it's not because they work out harder than other athletes. It's because when they hit the ground, they receive a tremendous amount of impact force. The challenge with gymnasts is that they retire on average at the age of 19, and they do have a high incidence of hip and knee replacement surgeries as they age. So it's very hard on impact. Is great for building bone, but very hard on your joints.
Yeah.
And after he told his mom, look, all you got to do is be a gymnast. She didn't think that was very funny. And so one of the things he discovered, which helped him in his thinking, is there was a study that came out of Brazil where the researchers, found that, like say, for instance, I'm doing a bench press, that you're 7 times stronger at the apex of your bench press than you are when the bar is on your chest. And that makes sense because you just don't have any leverage. Your joint is compromised and all that thing. And he's like, well, wait a second. If you're 7 times stronger here, could you impose force sufficient to trigger osteogenesis or the development of new bone? And so he started this concept of creating a prototype and making that story, already a long story, shorter, is that within a year and a half, his mom was able to reverse her osteoporosis, increasing her bone density sufficiently enough to where it no longer had a DEXA scan that showed that she had osteoporosis. And so he started developing some prototypes and so forth. And he was doing a lecture in Memphis, Tennessee. My wife and I just moved from Houston up here to the Nashville area in 2010, and I was really getting bored of running my software company. It just wasn't challenging anymore. My staff was doing their job, and it was just no more challenges, right?
Yeah.
And here I'm 40 years old and kind of like, I got to do something. Maybe I'll start a gym or a gym chain or something. And I just couldn't get excited about that because at the time there was like 35,000 gyms in the United States. And I'm just like, the world just doesn't need another gym, right? Like there's not a lot of innovation. I like the gym industry and what it does. I like to work out, but I was just like, I don't need to create another gym. That won't get me out of bed in the morning. So somebody called me up and said, "Hey, I heard you're thinking of starting a gym chain. You should talk to this sales guy, and he's got this new technology." And I'm like, "Great." I talked to him. I didn't understand it, but it was kind of intriguing. And I'm from the South, and I didn't have the heart to tell him I wasn't interested, because I just kind of changed my mind and didn't want to open up a gym. But it did sound intriguing. He's like, "Well, Jaquish is coming to Memphis to do a lecture on this." And it was the first weekend after we moved in this new home that I didn't have anything to do. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? This weekend?" I'm like, "It's like a 3-hour drive. What the heck?" So I drove out there and listened to him, and he starts explaining this, and he's got one of these devices that he's putting into a chiropractor's office, and he's giving this lecture, and I get out my phone and I start timing the sessions that he's taking these people through, and I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm thinking, this is the most profound, unusual musculoskeletal development system in the history of the world. If what he's saying is true, this is going to change everything. And so I took him out to dinner, and I said, "About how many of these prototypes of your system do you have out there in the marketplace?" He's like, "About a dozen." And I said, "My guess is that nobody's using it after 30 days. He says, "What, are you reading my freaking emails?" And I said, "No one understands it. No one's going to believe that you could do 60 seconds of effort and get this outcome. If they are getting an outcome, they're going to attribute it to anything else. So if you're putting them in chiropractors' offices, gyms, physical therapists, or wherever you're trying to sell this, it will always fail." I said, "I think you've I think you've discovered the potential for a new industry. I'm the guy." And he's like, "Yeah, I've heard like 50 people tell me that." And I said, "We've never met Kyle freaking Zagrodzky, because when I set my mind to something, I am a bulldog." And then like 30 days later, we were opening up our first prototype center. And I didn't know how to market this or whatever. Like I always done a lot of gyms, but I'm like, I don't know what this consumer wants, or even if they'll know what we are, but I figured out what the heck, it gives me something to do and a problem to solve. And that's how it got started.
Yeah, the problem to solve and delivering value. How much time did you spend digging into the research? Because this is really a stretch. I've been going to OsteoStrong, I think, for 2 months, right? Which means 8 sessions. Maybe there's an extra one because an extra week in there, right? And it literally is, there's 4 machines. Correct me on any of this that I get wrong. So I'm pushing, and they're like, get to your max push at full extension typically, or at a good extension, at a safe extension. That's probably the perfect word, right? And so your target, and we'll talk about the targets. I hit my target, they count down for 5 seconds, and then I move on to the next machine. So I'm literally sitting on the machine for 15, like let's just say I'm super slow and lazy, 45 seconds times 4 machines. Like it's less than 5 minutes of being on the machine, and then it's more like 40 seconds of actual effort.
Across all 4 machines.
Across all 4 machines, like, and this is having a profound impact. Like, how long did it take you to convince yourself through the research that John had published and was doing, that this was like legitimate? Like, because that's a startling.
There was no research. Everything was virtually anecdotal. And there was research on bone density as it relates to Wolff's Law or mechanotransduction. So I knew pressure would build bone, and these devices were creating an unbelievably high level of force on the bone safely. And I'm like, okay, well, I know it's going to get. I'm intuitively like, I don't need to be told certain things, right? Like there's some things are just kind of like almost common sense, and I was like, well, I'll figure it out from there. The other thing that it really helped with me personally is that I had decades of chronic joint and back pain, such that I couldn't even work out. I couldn't lift weights; it would give me a migraine headache. There were so many things I couldn't do that I just kind of learned to live with. And so many activities that I just abbreviated from my life, or just removed from my life, because I just couldn't do them. And I had done about 5 to 7 sessions, and all my joint and back pain was gone. Like,
Wow.
I tried chiropractic, and massage therapy and acupuncture and all these things. I took about 15 to 20 Advil a week for like 20 years, just because this is the only way I can get through my day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so then I'm just like, what? I'm not in pain anymore at all. Like I could do this, I could do that. Like now I'm 55 years old. I have no joint and back pain. Like I'm like, oh, if it only did this one thing, this was worth the journey. And it does so much more than that. Bone density is just part of it. But for me and so many others, I could give you testimonials that are just unbelievable of people who've just had high level 8, 9, 10 chronic level pain for like over a decade. And then they come in there and they're like a month later, they're nothing. Just
Wow.
calm.
And those testimonials, I'm sure, are continuing to reign in as you know expand to 200 locations and
Yeah, my franchisees don't even like regard them anymore. They're like, oh yeah, talk to Susie Q over here. She she canceled her knee replacement surgery, and to them, it's just they don't even see it as a thing anymore. They're just
yeah.
like, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling with my product, and you shared an amazing testimonial before we got started. Like we're getting these testimonials, and at first I'm like, do I believe this? Like, is this placebo? Like, what's actually going on here? And then I just get so many testimonials. Yes, 100%, I believe you because I've heard amazing things, very different than the testimonial
Yeah,
you were.
I'm gonna ask you to let me tell you the testimonial that we saw with your product. We can do it now or at the end, however you want to do it. But
Yeah, I mean, if you we'll cut it out or edit it or we'll figure something out. But
whatever you
yeah,
want to do. So yeah, my son brought home had bought a puppy, and he didn't ask me. He's 21 years old. He's a man. It's his money, but he lives here. So he just decided to buy a puppy, and when he went to go get it, there was something wrong with it, and the breeder felt bad, so she gave him one of the other puppies, but they were just going to euthanize it because it was really bad off, and so he couldn't tolerate that. So he's like, my dad's this biohacker guy. If anybody's going to be able to help this dog, it's my dad, right? And he brought home this puppy, and it's a little pug. And this little thing, it could only spin in circles. It was shaking its head violently. If you tried to give it food, it had a hard time eating because it couldn't hold its head still. It was really sad. Now, I've been around a lot of animals my whole life. We had a lot of farm animals growing up. I've owned a lot of animals and this kind of like I have a lot of intuition when looking at health, the animal I can determine its health for whatever reason. And I looked at this thing and I said, I said, son, this animal's probably not going to live 2 weeks. And I'm not going to spend money on medical bills for this thing. They think it has got water on its brain and all kinds of other things. And it's definitely the run to the litter, and it has like messed up eyes. It can't see that well. And so I'll do the best I can. And you and I had just spoken like a few days before, and you sent me some of that product and you said, hey, do you have dogs? I'll send you some of that one too for dogs. And so I'm like, it showed up the day after this puppy came in. So I was just like, you know what? I gave it like 3 doses of this stuff a day in its food. Now it's been about a month and a half. That dog is about 85 to 90% better. Now, and he might be close to 100% better, but his eyes and he's kind of underdeveloped, but he runs and plays. And last night, my wife and I were sitting down, and with the other, so we got 2 pugs, the female that was the healthy one, and this one, those animals were on a full tear, spazzing out, running around for half an hour. When the vet saw this dog, she said, it's a miracle. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. So that's not a placebo because the dog doesn't even know we're giving that stuff to him. So I've been taking that product every day. I'm like, dang, that's pretty amazing. Now I don't suffer from inflammation because of like the fasting and all the stuff that I do. So I'm a real bad product tester. But I know what it's doing after a long conversation with you, and I'm like, I'm never going to not take this product. It's amazing because I know what it's doing. It saved that dog's life. So I'm like, man, this is actually doing what he said it did.
Thank you so much for that. Let's get back to OsteoStrong. You go to this presentation. You and your wife pray on it. Like so now you're going down this path. And one of the things that you obviously realize is you've got to start getting some evidence, like some proof that stuff is going on. Or do you really start kind of throwing franchises together? You start getting testimonials and then work on evidence after? What does that look like?
Everything all at once.
Yeah.
So the best thing we can do was pre and post DEXA scans from members. We didn't have a DEXA scan in the facility. They didn't have that. We couldn't get a licensure without having an on-site radiologist or doctor here. Even though like a DEXA scan produces about as much radiation as a banana. Right, you eat a banana, you're going to have as much radiation as a DEXA scan, but because it has the R word in it, you got to have the device certified and all this kind of stuff. So we were relying on the members' DEXA scans that they had gotten. Of course, it takes like a year or two because Medicare only pays for that. So then we were relying upon strength and balance and joint and back pain testimonials and struggling through like how do we communicate this to people in a way that they'll believe and understand it. I did more lunch and learns with doctors and just different businesses and groups and all stuff. Like I've just did all the things, I call it smashing your face against a wall, right? You're just doing everything to try to figure out where the traction is going to come from. Doctors were funny because you're thinking, oh man, they're seeing all these patients. They have these, an OBGYN is doing DEXA scans. They're going to bring them in here, teach them what they would go, wow, that's really interesting. That should work. That's, I'll send you my patients. And then you would get nothing. I'm like, there's something here I'm missing. So I don't know what's going on here. But so I just said, you know what? Doctors aren't ready for this. They're busy. One of my brothers is a doctor and, he says, look, people are always bringing stuff to us, hey, I'm taking this supplement and what do you think of this? And I'm now starting to eat, whatever, celery or whatever. And he's like, part of your job as a doctor is to kind of keep people from getting involved with snake oil. And he goes, we're busy, the insurance payments, the running of practice, doctors are make crappy business people. If, in general, they're good at what they do, but just, promoting something and telling people about something is just not what they do. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of like a lot more grace for, after kind of hearing that explanation, I'm like, okay, I get it. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go straight to the consumer. And there are a lot of people out there that are looking for a non-pharmaceutical solution for a medical problem. And so I'm just like, okay, that's what we're going to go for. OsteoStrong helps anybody, whether you're high performance athletes. I mean, it's helped young people. My middle son, he'd be walking with a cane or a walker right now if it wasn't for OsteoStrong. But you can't be everything to everybody. Like your product is like my product in one way, and that everybody should be taking it all the time. Yeah. It helps everybody, but you've got to like, okay, where's the niche that wants this product and will understand the messaging? We'll worry about expanding later. Yep. Right. And so I'm just like, women over 55 years old who either have low bone density or are afraid of it because their mother had osteoporosis and broke their hip. That was the only consumer that understood what we were doing. So I just said, forget everything else. That's my consumer. Let's go. Yeah. No, and that's, again, I think I mentioned in the intro, like you have the experience of, if you didn't have the experience that you had prior to starting up OsteoStrong, you might have floundered a lot longer with trying to figure out like what's the target, like having run a business, having business owners. I can't imagine floundering longer than I did in this company. Yeah. So you realize you need to start doing research, or maybe you're getting, when do you, relative to like number of franchises, and maybe it's just one, when do you kind of publish your first paper? When did we publish our first paper? Yeah, I think it was 2013 was the one that was the first one, the earliest one mentioned on your website. Right. So Jaquish had done a small pilot study when he was getting his PhD, and he published a book on that. I think there was like 7 or 8 people, women in that study. It was like a 6-month study. They saw like a 7% increase in bone density, but just not a very efficacious study. No control group, not very many subjects. Then they did a larger study with like 20 people in it. all postmenopausal women. There was 6 month study. Those on average saw like 14% increase in bone density, which is not even normal for us. I mean, people do see those kind of results, but and then we ran with that for a while. We knew we needed to do more studies, and then the applying for grants, doing studies. That is such an unsatisfying process for an entrepreneur to go through, because getting funding, doing the study, waiting for it to go through peer review. I mean, that's a multi-year effort. And it costs a lot of money if you're funding yourself. But I finally just ripped the Band-Aid off in 2019, and it's like, okay, I had two groups that wanted to do research. It was three groups. It was going to be about $1 million, and I spent the money. They started the study. COVID hit. They stopped the study, and then after COVID, started the study again. Some cases it took more money. They're 9 month studies, and then they futz around for, there's a 6 to 9 months to compile data. There's no sense of urgency in the research world. They don't care. No. Then they'll give you an abstract, which is like a sliver of the study, and then it goes through peer review, and peer review could take 6 months to multiple years. And so that whole process. Now the good news is, so we started that back in 2019. We funded 3 studies. They all finished. Yay!
That is step one,
dude. Like step 7 in that process.
Oh, yeah.
and then they published 2 of the abstracts from that study, from the 2 different studies. The one that was done in Greece, the one that was done in Sweden. Those are larger studies. The Greek study was 140 subjects with 50% in the control group. The Swedish study was 192 subjects with 50% in the control group. And they looked at multiple things. So they're looking at bone density of both cortical and trabecular bone. And for those that don't know it, that's cortical is the outside layer of your bone. Trabecular bone is the inside tissue of your bone. And then they looked at A1C, which is your long-term blood glucose marker for people. People are very interested in that as it relates to metabolic dysfunction. They looked at balance and strength. So all 4 of those things were looked at in both of those studies. And there's a smaller study that just completed about a month and a half ago that we conducted. Duquesne University conducted. There was only, I think, 20 or 40 subjects in that study. And what they wanted, because Duquesne was doing a lot of stuff with melatonin, and they wanted to, and melatonin can inspire osteoblastic activity. So osteoblasts are your cells in your bone that cause your bone to build. And so melatonin actually stimulates that. So they wanted to see if somebody was taking melatonin and doing OsteoStrong, would it have a better result? I actually thought that study got trashed. I gave up on it. I'm like, you know what? I got my Greek study, my Swedish study.
I got my 2.
It was probably some PhD student that was trying to get their thesis done, and then they graduated and moved on with their life. And I just like, you know what? I'll just write that off as lost money. And then somebody contacted me a week and a half ago. Oh, just want to let you know the Duquesne study's done. I'm like, what? They actually... Okay, cool. Right?
I was counting on that.
Yeah, I was really staying up late and worrying about that. I just forgot about it. I just like, you know what? It's the cost of doing business. Go grow your brand.
Yep.
And so those are all done, and the results of the Swedish from the Swedish abstract and the Greek abstract were phenomenal. They were phenomenal, and I'm only looking at a piece of the study, so I'm just salivating. And researchers are so hard to talk to. Like, they won't tell you anything. You're not even allowed. They won't. Like, I wrote the check. I looked at the protocols that they were going to be testing. I approved those. I wrote the check, and then haven't talked to anybody since. That was back in 2019.
Wow.
When I was up in Toronto meeting the Swedish researchers for the first time, never had a conversation with these people. They flew out to Toronto to present the study. There's like thousands of researchers and endocrinologists that go to this thing, and I'm taking them out to dinner, and I'm buying a nice dinner the night before they're going to present the abstract. So, can y'all tell me something? Nope, they won't do it. I'm like, It's just,
Whisper
I'm not
something.
paying the bill. I'm not paying the bill. Waiter, take their food.
Write a
But
note in
yeah,
your rice.
yeah. So I'm just, and I'm treated like I'm just any other person there. So I'm standing there waiting for them to reveal the results of the abstract. And the cool thing about the Swedish study, that was the one that had 192 people in it. So half the people in that study, there wasn't a control group necessarily. What they were doing was the protocol that the Swedish government had created for for people that were concerned about low bone density. So they had to do that exercise protocol, which is like 2 hours of exercise a week. And then there was the OsteoStrong protocol. And the researchers were shocked. They were like, wait a minute, they're doing this once a week. It's like 60 seconds of effort. What's your at home protocol? We're like, we don't have one. And you're just going to do this. The other thing they were surprised about, a couple of things. One is that 95% of the OsteoStrong subjects completed it. It was a 9-month study, and they were like, that never happens with like an exercise deal. You're always having people drop out. There were no injuries. They couldn't believe that. And one of the things they were testing, which I was very excited about, was there's a thing called, you have DEXA scan results, but then you have like bone quality, which is a much better measurement of whether or not your bone can withstand fractures. And so they did this little test, and it basically takes a needle and tries to put an indentation in your tibia, which is your shin bone, and then it can measure how hard it is to make that dent. The OsteoStrong group saw a 2.9% increase in their bone quality, and the exercise group had been doing 2 hours a week for 9 months, saw no change in their increase in bone quality. And so they've been doing 2 hours of work a week versus 60 seconds. So it was like 70 something hours of effort versus like 6 minutes of effort over 9 months.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Amazing that you're doing research. A lot of people skip it and just go to the marketing and whatever. So great that you're doing the research. I'm happy all three came in. That's phenomenal. There's two things that I want to touch and then get to our final questions. One of them is there is a protocol. I think the number is 4.2 times your body weight. I want to talk a little bit about where that came from. And I'll remember the other question while you're answering that.
Sure, no problem. So so we've known, as I mentioned earlier, that the medical community, physical therapists, chiropractors have known that pressure builds bone. That comes from a guy by the name of Dr. Julius Wolff. In the 1890s, he conducted a study, and he discovered that the concept of mechanotransduction, that if you put enough pressure on the musculoskeletal system, it will respond by making bone stronger. Now, this was before human ethics boards, so I don't know anything about that study of how he figured that out back then. But the thing was that it was such an impactful study, and it was so statistically efficacious that it became known as Wolff's Law, and it's still taught in medical schools to this day. But what was not answered from that study was probably one of the most important questions that everybody just never really thought about, which is, what is the minimum dose response of pressure required to trigger osteogenesis, or the development of new bone? And so there was a research. So that's why, like, when you go to the doctor, like, exercise, probably should lift weights and eat right, and that'll help your bone. That's not true. And so, as it turns out, it's not true. And here's why I know. And to answer your question specific to 4.2 multiples of body weight, is there was a researcher by the name of Dr. Kevin Deere out of Bristol, United Kingdom, and he held a large study. There was over 700 subjects that completed the study. But what he did was he attached these accelerometers to the hips of his subjects, and he was able to measure the amount of impact force that they received. And he expressed that in terms of multiples of their body weight, which I thought was genius, because If you've got a 230-pound person and a 105-pound person, it stands to reason that the larger person is going to require more pressure, right? Because their musculoskeletal system is already used to holding that weight. So he decided we should track this in terms of multiples of body weight. And of all the subjects that completed the study, there was only like a dozen that actually triggered osteogenesis. And they were the ones that exceeded 4.2 multiples of body weight. In fact, unless they did achieve 4.2 multiples of body weight, nothing happened. It was like the boiling point of water. You can get 3.9, nothing happened. And so this idea that lifting weights or running or jogging or sprinting was going to generate enough impact force to trigger osteogenesis just simply wasn't true. It doesn't do anything. I'm going to say it doesn't do anything because you can, if you're doing extreme heavyweight lifting, it could either slow your bone loss and in some rare cases actually see a slight increase in bone density. So I'm not going to say don't do it. I'm an advocate of exercise. There's a lot of other benefits for doing it. So, but if your outcome is to build bone, it requires a lot of pressure to do that. And so it's like, okay, great. Impact builds bone, but impact, like I said, is really hard on your joints. So that OsteoStrong, so we had to create a way to be able to emulate impact force, but without the impact.
And you do that with that isometric pressure at the extension where you can hold 7 times what you can, like in the case of a bench press. You said,
you want to do it as hard as you can while maintaining comfort, because 4.2 is what they need in the study. But the thing about it is that you don't really know for sure how much a person needs. For instance, if you've got really a lot stronger bone than me, and we don't know that, you're going to require more pressure to build bone than me, right? So it's kind of like a basic rule of understanding. Like in the subjects in this guy's study, they needed 4.2. Now, is that for everybody? Is that like for every human being? No. So what we do when somebody comes in is we have them push as hard as they can while maintaining comfort, because their central nervous system is a thing called neural inhibition. And what that means is, if I were to, you're strong enough to break my fingers, right? Like your grip, you could probably grab my finger and break my finger. Okay, kind of gross, but you're not strong. You are strong enough to break your own hand just by making a fist, but you can't, because your central nervous system will step in and stop you from creating a level of force that causes you injury. The machines at OsteoStrong work the same way. You can push as hard as you can while maintaining comfort. I say while maintaining comfort because if your muscle starts to cramp or you've got an alignment issue that day, it kind of feels uncomfortable, then just stop. But you can't push so hard on the machines that you could fracture your own bone. And so that's the concept of what we do. Neural inhibition protects you. So just following the coaching of the session coach, just push as hard as you can while maintaining comfort, and you will exceed that 4.2 multiple, but it doesn't mean you should stop. You should go as hard as you can. Hit your maximum.
One question I have, because I've gotten this interpretation, I want to know if it's right, is that if I'm putting the 4.2 load on some of my bones, does that send chemical responses throughout the body to actually build bone in other places, or is it only the bones that I'm specifically stressing that
Probably
that will see
ones that you're
genesis?
specifically stressing. It's not a chemical reaction. What it is, it's a flexing and a compression of bone in that area. We could see this with certain types of athletes that get more impact force on one extremity than another, and they'll have higher bone density in that area. So like a right-footed soccer player will have more bone density in their left foot, because if they go up to kick a ball in the air and then they'll land on that left foot when they come down, and it's the leg receiving impact force. So it's where you get the most impact force that you'll have more bone density. You can see this with like professional boxers or MMA fighters. The one arm will have more bone density than the other.
Okay, and then we're talking about 60 total seconds of effort. Again, I've been going to OsteoStrong, so we start on a vibration plate just to kind of warm up things, get some movement going, and then we go to the equipment. And it is once a week. I mean, it's hard to fathom 60 seconds once a week having any impact. And I believe you, it does. There's research that supports that. And you actually end up with significantly higher compliance. I think you were telling me your attrition rate is like 2% and below, with some locations actually like in the 1% range. Yeah. By the way, attrition is how many customers who are on board stop coming. And then your compliance, which is people coming in and taking advantage of their weekly session, is in the 98%. Have you thought about, so that's fantastic. And some of that has to be like, you push really hard, but it's super quick you're in and out, and you don't have to change your clothes. And you're like, there's so many things that are easy. Have you looked at doing it more than once a week? Like, does that change anything? Is that maybe kind of a future study?
That's a great question, and I think there is room to doing a future study on that. But what we do know about bone, I could probably better explain it to you and your audience on what we know about muscle. Mm. So, in weight training, you don't want to work out the same muscle group every day. Muscle recovery, repair, and protein synthesis take about 36 to 40 hours, depending upon your metabolism. If you're working out that same muscle group every day, it's actually shown negative results. Mm. So you have to have, that's why people work out a muscle group every other day, right? And so it's recovery time. Bone density, we know, is about 7 days. Your cardiovascular system is about 8 hours. So we know that. We haven't specifically tested it. I'm going to be an old man by the time all the studies, like I'll be 73 years old and like, oh my gosh, you can do it twice a week, right? So we'll see how that goes. But we know that bone recovery time is a week, so that's what we've done. We haven't tested it specific to OsteoStrong, but since we're doing such substantial loading, it stands to reason that that's probably a safe amount of time.
So clearly, target, and you honed in on a particular target of an audience that you feel like you can speak to, which is people who are, concerned about bone density loss, or, maybe have been diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, and so you've done that. But in my opening and in my research, you're looking at improving posture, bone density, obviously, but posture, balance, improved athletic performance, and experience less in joint and back pain. Talk a little bit about, like, great, we've built bone, so why would this 60-second workout that results in more dense bone have any impact anywhere else?
That is absolutely the most important question, and an absolutely necessary question. So the way we do it, there's so many things going on. I'll talk about balance and agility, then I'll talk about strength. When you're learning something, you've got two neurons, and they're connected by they have a little thread. That connection on the outside of that thread is called a myelin sheath, right? Mm-hmm. As you learn something and you do it over and over and over again, that myelin sheath starts to get thicker and it becomes easier. So it's like learning how to ride a bike when you're a little kid. You're just like a fish out of water, floundering around trying to get it. But once you do it, you're a little easier. And the more you pedal, the more you do it, the myelin sheath is getting thicker between those neurons that have learned that balance. And then, a month later, 2 months later, you're riding with no hands, right? Your athletic performance and balance and agility are very closely connected to that very concept. It's one of the reasons why golfers and pitchers and batters will just constantly do a repetitive action, because they're strengthening the myelin sheath between their brain and all the nerves that connect to those muscle fibers. So it creates muscle memory. In reality, what you're creating is neurological memory, and you're strengthening the myelin sheath. That's why somebody who used to be really good at sports and they'll play for 20 years, and then they go up against somebody and they're still good at it because those connections still exist. So when you do a session at OsteoStrong, because you are doing maximum loading in a biomechanically optimal position for maximum force, you are recruiting a maximum amount of muscle fiber, and you're recruiting a maximum neurological commitment to that contraction, more than you've probably ever done with any exercise in the history of your life. And so, like, if I lift up a 5 pound weight with my bicep, I am working out my bicep, but the amount of muscle fibers and neurological effort I have to do to lift that 5 pound weight, I could do 10 other things because it's not taking any effort or concentration.
Right.
But now that you've done an OsteoStrong session, you might be able to relate to this. Is that when you start pushing as hard as you can, like, everything else gets phased out. Like, you can't even hear, you may not even realize this, you can't even hear somebody talking to you. The neurological commitment to get every muscle fiber to fire at the same time is so great that everything else gets filtered out. And because you're using so many neurological connections and muscle fibers, a number of things are happening. One, you're strengthening the myelin sheath connection to each one of those muscle fibers so that it responds better. So the initial jump in strength that people see is neurological. The muscle's just functioning better. It's receiving commands better. But the other thing that's happening is when you hit a maximum force production in a strong range of in a strong position without motion. Okay, that's very important. If your muscle's in motion, you're not able to engage every muscle fiber at the same time because it's constantly reforming and moving. Your neural inhibition is preventing you from damaging your joints. So a one max rep in the gym is not going to get as much muscle recruitment as a one max session at OsteoStrong, because the muscle is not in motion, the joint's not in motion, neural inhibition at the joint level is not in play, and as such, you're able to recruit all those muscle fibers at the same time. And it is the holy grail of athletic performance. Something very magical happens when you do that, and it's called myofibril hypertrophy. It is the holy grail of all athletic performance, is how do you create hypertrophy of the muscle fibers? Not of size. You're not getting sarcoplasmic hypertrophy because the osteostrong is not going to give you bigger muscles. It's going to give you more dense muscles. And so it's creating hypertrophy at the level of the muscle fibers. And when you do that, you get substantially stronger. The strength and athletic performance increases we've seen at OsteoStrong. There is, my hand to God, I have never seen anything more substantial in terms of results in any exercise in the world. And I can tell you about triathletes, swimmers, golfers, tennis players, football players, you name the sport, every one of them starts breaking their own records after 5 or 6 sessions. There'll be 2 types of athletes in the future. There'll be ones that go to OsteoStrong and ones that lose. Everything is about myofibril hypertrophy. And when you add to that, the communication channels of your brain through your nerves to your muscles are working better. It's like they work better and they're mechanically stronger.
Wow. That's phenomenal. Then you build strength. If you're a bodybuilder, you can actually work out with bigger weights,
Yeah.
and so
Well,
then therefore you can.
Bodybuilders don't really care about lifting bigger weights because the goal of a bodybuilder is size and size of the muscle, physique, shape of the muscle, all that kind of stuff. A power lifter, however, they will. In fact, Dr. Ann Sung did a study for Aerospace and Medicine journal, which is like the journal for NASA. They commissioned her to do a pilot study. She was the only subject in the study, but she was a 31-year-old professional power lifter at the time of that study, and she was able to increase the amount of weight that she could lift in her competitive weights by 12% after only 4 sessions at OsteoStrong. And she told me that would take her normally a year to achieve that result in the gym.
Wow.
And she saw like almost a 7% increase in bone density in 6 months. For a power lifter who's 31 years old, who's already at peak bone mass, that's a game changer.
Well, and you spoke a lot about kind of muscle recruitment as it relates to kind of athletic performance, but isn't there also some, as you increase your bone density, then there is a communication feedback loop, which is we can actually take more load
Yeah,
because we're actually stronger now.
I was going to say that. So thank you. Great question, Chris. You're the man. You're a good interviewer. So yeah, one of the things that athletes don't understand, which try to tell an athlete they don't understand something about their body, and you're going to get some dragon's breath on you. They hate that. But one of the things people don't understand about athletic performance is one of the inhibiting characteristics of plateaus, or what it will cause the plateaus, is actually bone strength. Your central nervous system will never allow your muscle to become stronger than what your bones can actually handle. And by increasing your bone density and bone strength and bone quality, which we are doing, then you're raising the threshold that your central nervous system determines safe for your muscle performance. And that's why, like Ann Sung, she was like, I'm able to lift 12% more weight at the gym after 4 sessions, or 60-second, less than 2 minutes, 3 minutes of effort at OsteoStrong, and I can now do 12%. But she was just blown away. She's like, had I not done this myself, I would not have believed it. Yeah, and you get that a lot. We're getting past that now with a lot of people. Athletes still have to go through some of the learning curves. Our biggest challenge is athletes don't like to talk about their results because they don't want to compete with people that are doing this. It's too easy to do.
Interesting.
It's an
Yep.
easy hack. It's like, I could go into OsteoStrong for 5 minutes and I could beat everybody. I'm not going to tell anybody about that. I'm trying to get a scholarship. I'm trying to make a living here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I've got some wrap up questions, so I know you've got kind of a hard stop. So let's kind of jump into those. We are a longevity and health podcast. Do you have a target age that you want to live to?
No, I don't have a target age. And what I really want is I want maximum quality for the time that I have. And quality for me really means two things. One, it's being able to do physically what I want to do while I'm here. And two, being able to make as much of an impact as I can with the life that I've been given. So I'm going to live as long as I'm going to live. I'm doing most of the things that most human beings would do for longevity. So I'm doing my part. I'm not going to worry about a number. I'm just going to, and focusing on numbers is not what causes people to live longer anyway. It's having goals and things that you're excited about. So my goal is to continue to be excited about the future, continue to have goals to work on. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both died 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. After 1776, 50 years later, they died. Signing of the Declaration of Independence. They lived that long because they both had the goal of living to see that day. So we as human beings live longer by taking care of ourselves, but also having goals and being excited about the future.
Excellent. So how long do you think humans can live? Like, I know you're in biohacking, and so what do you do? What is your kind of gut feel?
I think 120 years. I think the Bible says the 120 years is how long people can live. And I think that's probably a pretty reasonable deal. And to me, it's about quality of life, relationships, and impact. And so when I see people give up, and people die after they retire pretty quickly if they're not moving towards something, whatever. So if different people talk about, I'm going to live to be 150 years old, and I'm like, okay, well, everybody you know is going to be dead, and so it's harder for older people to make relationships. I think the biggest thing is impact. And so if you could live to be 120 years old, you're probably living that long because you're still making an impact and you're excited about the future.
Very cool. What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span can you share?
Longevity, intermittent fasting is the number one thing. More research is showing that if you're just eating one meal a day, or at least at a minimum, I think if Americans would just skip breakfast and just have 2 meals a day, we'd probably get rid of 50% of the health problems we have in this country. Intermittent fasting is massive. There's a few other things I do, like pulsed electromagnetic field mats, or PEMF mats. Those have become very important for people who live and work indoors and around Wi-Fi. If you saw your blood under a microscope right now and saw what it looked like, it would scare you. And the reason for that is that when our body's energy is off kilter and it gets that way from just being inside and Wi-Fi, your blood gets staticky and it stacks up like a stack of donuts and you're not getting proper oxygenation. You need to do that every day. If you're not outside and grounding and barefoot all the time, then you're not getting oxygen, and not having oxygen is a source of so many disease states. So I would do pulse electromagnetic field mat. I would do intermittent fasting. And if you have it, I would get the OsteoStrong red light system. It's the best red light system in the world. The next closest one, which ours is much more powerful than, is like $120,000. You can get an OsteoStrong red light system panel for like $2,900. Now we haven't even started marketing that. We've only made it available to franchisees. So we'll probably launch that after the first year. I've just been busy.
How much was that? What did you say?
Like $2,900 for a 1 foot by 3 foot panel. It's not just powerful; it's what it could do. There's research that shows that pulsing the lights, you don't want to be looking at near infrared light in your eyes for more than a couple minutes because it actually heats up the lights in your eyes. Goggles don't protect your eyes, so you have to have a system that cycles the near infrared on your eyes, or you're damaging your eyes. And so our system does so many things. It has recipes specific to research and specific to the frequencies that are in OsteoStrong. So we have more power, more lights, more frequencies, and less cost than anything else in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
It's outstanding. So I would do those three things, and I would take your product. You want to do. You're going to be eating bad sometimes. You're going to be getting inflammation, whatever. You want to give your body the tools to eliminate as much inflammation as possible, and your product does that. I mean, it does be. There's lots of great supplements out there, but you want ones that reduce supplement. And I would take about 5,000 units of vitamin D3 a day. Those are just. You asked for a couple. We get a whole podcast on the stuff that I've learned.
That's awesome. And just to share, what we can say about our product and inflammation is that it addresses inflammation caused by exercise, right? Other types of inflammation we can't speak to yet. We just need to do more research, but
It likely does. It likely does. I mean, my reading of it is that it's doing it. So.
What are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity or a long health span?
I think it's not so much their fault. There's a couple things. One, people don't realize that all biological organisms are calorie consumers and calorie conservers. We are genetically wired to consume calories and to conserve them, and people go out and start a fitness routine, for instance, and then they don't do it. Why don't they do it? They don't do it because you're biologically wired not to do it. It's very hard for most human beings to do fitness. And so what you need to do and all these things are good for you. Working out is great for you. Lifting heavy is great for you. Intermittent fasting is great for you. All these things are great for you. You have to think about, what are you going to do? You don't have to do a lot to have a massive impact on your health, but you have to select things that strategically you will and can do. It's one of the reasons why I love intermittent fasting, because it doesn't cost anything. In fact, you're saving money. And you can start by like, you know what, I'm not going to eat breakfast, and I won't eat carbs at dinner. Right? If you just did those two things, you're going to start having. I could take 5,000 units of vitamin D3 a day. That's going to improve my immune system. These are things you will do. My wife, if I am not here, if I'm traveling, she won't take her vitamins. I have to get her supplements stacked together for her every morning. But I do that for her. I love her. She's great. And so, like, you could go out and buy all these supplements, but I have to have them. I put them there by my coffee station, and that's when I take your product. Is as the water's boiling, pour, do that, done. The first thing I do every day, and it's right there in my routine. So you have to have a routine and a strategy, and then you will win. Don't take on something you won't do. I love biohacks that don't take effort and don't take much time. Actually, because our red light system is so powerful, it's like 5 minutes, and you're going to have a better result than if you did like a Juve or a Mito for like 30 minutes.
Wow.
So it's 5 minutes. I'll do it. Like if I had to stand in front of the damn thing for for a half an hour, I wouldn't do it. I don't have time to stand around for a half an hour.
Yep.
That drives me crazy.
I think that's a great thing is the people maybe going down particular paths without a strategy and without a routine around it. That's a mistake that people are making. I think that's great. Kyle, how can people contact you?
I'm actually kind of a hard guy to get in contact with, and I apologize for that for anybody. But our website, osteostrong.me, if somebody needs to talk to me or invite me to our podcast, just email us at support@osteostrong.com. Or osteostrong.me or .com, osteostrong support at osteostrongfranchising.com. That will get that. Then you say, I need to talk to Kyle. I want to do a podcast with him or whatever. I do have a LinkedIn page. I check it about once a month now. I used to check it all the time. Or you could reach out to our PR team, osteostrong at interdependence.com. That's the way to get a hold of us.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm excited about where OsteoStrong is going. I have a really big goal. I don't want osteoporosis to be even a thing in 30 years. And the way that I will get that done is have OsteoStrong in every high school around the world. If kids did this just in high school for 4 years, their peak bone mass at 30 would be so high they would probably never get osteoporosis.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
It would eliminate the disease state. I think it would drop by 80 to 90%.
Kyle, this has been an amazing interview. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being I actually was going to throw in like the patron saint of osteoporosis elimination, because I think patron really fits, right? Like you're shepherding this forward. You can contact him at osteostrong.me or at least find out some details. There's an email, support at osteostrongfranchising.com if you want to get in contact with Kyle directly. There are franchises. I think there's 3. I know of at least 3 in Houston. They're all across the country and in a bunch of countries now. How many countries are you in?
14.
14 different. That's amazing. And you can find him on LinkedIn. It might take him a while to get back to you. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I could talk to you for hours. Really.
I think so. We probably need to get together and then talk for hours, and that won't be enough.
Next time I'm in Houston, I'm definitely going to give you a call.
That would be awesome. Kyle, Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.